How's it going, everybody? This is Dan, and this is Stories with Dan. This is episode 8, and today I'm going to be changing things up. Yesterday I told the story about saving the dogs on the highway, so if you haven't seen that one, go check it out. I would appreciate that. Today I'm going to be doing a different thing. As you can tell by the title, I'm doing movie versus the book, and it's going to be for the movie No Country for Old Men, and then obviously the book No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. And obviously the film was made by the Coen brothers. Now, if you haven't seen either of these or read or anything, the movie came out in 2007. This book, I can't tell you 100% when it was actually made. I'd have to go look around, so I'm not going to do that right now. Sorry about that. But yeah, clearly the book came before the movie. And today I'm reviewing the differences between the movie and the book. And so yeah, if you haven't seen any of them, spoiler alerts, I'm going to be telling stuff about the stories. So if you haven't seen either of them, go check them out. It's been a while, so you should have seen them by now. If you haven't, sorry. Anyways, so the book compared to the movie. Now, when the movie first came out in 2007, I was way too young to have seen it. And I think I remember seeing the previews for it. And also the Hills Have Eyes were coming out then or something, so the two trailers intermixed in my head, I think, and it just seemed like a scary movie, so I never ever watched it. But then once I was a little bit older, 16, 17, somewhere around there, my aunt was like, "Oh, this is a great movie," and I also had a friend who had mentioned it before of how good of a movie it was, so I finally watched it, and it was one of the best movies I've ever seen. Coen brothers are great filmmakers. They just know how to tell a story different than everyone else, and keep it original. Even though it was based off a book, it was still probably the best book you could have taken and turned into a movie, I would say. And when you read the book, it's written so well that it almost feels like it's almost like a script for a movie. That's how easy the read is. So it's not a hard read. I really recommended it to anybody. So now I want to get into some of the differences between the two. So I did see the movie first. It depends on. I think they're both great. There's not a lot of difference between the two. There's only some few things here and there, which I'll get into. And I really like both of them. Even though I saw the movie first, the book is still great. And also seeing the movie first kind of gives you faces and kind of. Seeing the movie first, you don't really get to use your imagination when reading the book on how people look and stuff like that. When you first read a book, you kind of picture everything in your head on your own because you have no references. It's just whatever your head pops up in your head. That's what you think. So, anyways, so some differences. I read the book last November. I bought it for about $4. Now, in the opening scene of No Country for Old Men, the sheriff, played by Tommy Lee Jones, goes into this monologue talking about how it used to be in the old times and how times are kind of changing. And it's hard for him to keep up as an old timer with, just people becoming more violent, drugs becoming more rampant in the country, weaponry getting crazier, and him just becoming an older man and becoming slower and a few steps behind everyone, fighting crime. So the book opens up, and the monologue compared to the movie monologue in the book is a lot longer. There's a lot more of the sheriff, who's played by Tommy Lee Jones in the movie, talking more about the intro and stuff like that. So that's one difference. So nothing, in a book and a movie, you do have to shorten down some of the stuff because it would be a really long movie if you did everything exactly like the book. So an example would be Lord of the Rings. They pretty much did almost everything that was in the books, considering how long those movies are, and I'm sure they left out some stuff. It would have been even longer if they didn't. But so yeah, that's one little difference. But for the most part, the movie follows the book very closely, and some of the same lines, some of the same sayings. Some things are switched around here and there, but besides that, hang on. Sorry, my dog's barking. Anyways, so yeah, they kind of switch some things up here and there. So first thing, let me talk about some of the characters. So the characters' names are all pretty much the same. They didn't change much about them. The description of the characters are quite similar. If you've ever seen, the main bad guy played by Javier Bardem, he is his name is Shigur in the movie, or in the book and in the movie. His name is Shigur as the villain character, and pretty much a perfect definition of a psychopath. If you were to look up the definition of psychopath and talk to like psychologists and stuff, they say that the No Country for Old Men, the main criminal bad guy in No Country for Old Men, is like a perfect example of a true psychopath. Now in the book, if you've seen the movie, Javier Bardem, he's from Spain, so he does have a very unique look to him. They give him a very odd haircut, which they did find by looking at a bunch of mugshots in the area they were filming the movie at. They went through a pile of mugshots from the police stations and stuff until they found this one dude who had a haircut just like that looked crazy as hell. So that's why they gave him that haircut. Now in the book, they describe him as a man who is unidentifiable by like what he is exactly, like what like nationality. There's no this good description of like what nationality he actually is, and really the only big description you get is that he has these big blue eyes that are like these watery blue eyes. And in the movie, obviously, Javier Bardem doesn't have the blue eyes. So that's one difference right there in the book and in the movie. So yeah, there's that. But besides that, I mean, I guess we could talk about the difference in cover and the similarities in the covers for the film. On the book, it's kind of an all red background. It's got bushes, a silhouette of a man, and kind of like a silhouette of the sun setting in the background, and this man's kind of like looks like he's running towards you. And just like on the cover of the film, you got the main character, one of the main characters, I guess, Josh Brolin, the good simpleton guy who comes across the big stack of money. He's, it's a silhouette of a field. He's running, and there's a sunset behind him. A little more modern touch on it, obviously, than the book cover, but still very similar in that sense. And then another thing I'd say is everyone always wants to know, like at the end of the film when Shigur walks out of the house and then he gets hit by that car in the intersection and then just walks off, most people want to know what happened to the money. You never in the movie, you never see what actually happens to the money. Now that's where one of the major differences is in the book, because in the book you do find out what happens to the money, and you see what happens to the money before he goes and kills Josh Brolin's wife in the movie. You get to see that, or like whatever, but you never really know who he's talking to or what. But pretty much Javier Bardem in the book, or Shigur in the book, goes to some place, like a special office building of some kind, brings the money back, talks to the guy, and he's like, yes, there's all the money, blah, 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 except my expenses of about $10,000. So he spent about $10,000 within the book and the movie, obviously, chasing down Josh Brolin. The Llewellyn Mosk is his name in the book and the movie. He spends $10,000 chasing him down, trying to get back the $2.5 million that was in the suitcase originally. And yeah, so you read this little section of him, dropping off the money and giving the money back to the main bad guy who's supposed to get it back. And so that's kind of cool. Now, even though it's nice to see, okay, so that's where the money ended up. It just ended up back in the hands of the guy it originally belonged to, even though it took quite a while and he did have to hire the psychopath to go hunt it down. You do eventually get to see what happens to it and then whatever. But now what I like about the Coen brothers are always they write everything really well. If you've seen The Big Lebowski and stuff like that, like it's just such original movies. And I really like kind of how they didn't include that scene into the movie, because it just leaves this mystery of like, this whole time you're wondering who's going to get this money, who's going to get away with it, who's going to die, what's going to happen. And that never comes. You never get to see Shigur and Llewellyn Moss fight it out, because the Mexican drug dealers get to him before Shigur. And then Shigur goes and kills his wife. Tommy Lee Jones never gets to catch Shigur, even though he was super close to. Another difference. So, right there. In the book, now if you remember the scene in the movie, the sheriff is talking to another guy in Dallas, Texas, or wherever they are in the very last hotel, and he's telling him, he's like, yeah, this guy Shiger, he's so crazy. They don't know his name, but like the guy Shiger shows up and walks right back into a crime scene the next day and kills like another guy at the same place. And if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't, obviously go watch it. It's a great movie. So yeah, he sends him. So that gives Tommy Lee Jones' character, the sheriff, the idea. Oh, maybe I should go. He goes back to the motel that Llewellyn Mosk was killed at, that the Mexican drug dealers fled from, thinking maybe the money still might be there. And in the shot, how the Coen brothers do it, they have, you see Shiger, and it looks like he's behind the door in the shadows. And then you see the sheriff outside, like, pulling out his rifle because you can see that the lock has been shot out with Shiger's cattle gun that he uses throughout the film and the movie. And, yeah, he pretty much, like, he opens the door. Obviously, Shiger's not there, and there's a big kind of, like, camera switcheroo kind of thing. Now, in the book, it's a little different. Shiger goes into the room. He undoes the vent to the air conditioner where Llewellyn Mosk had hidden the suitcase originally in the first motel that he went to, and the Regal Motel. So in the movie, he hides, the first place that Josh Brolin goes and hides his money is in this shady motel in the air vent. And he leaves, but when he comes back, there's a bunch of Mexican drug dealers hiding in it because you can tell because he left the curtains perfectly closed and they're partway open now. So he doesn't go back in. He gets the room behind it and sends a pole through the air vent and pulls the briefcase through. And then Shiger at the same time happens to enter the room that he originally rented and shoots all these Mexican drug dealers in it and opens up the vent and notices like the drag marks of the briefcase. So he knows to look in the vent at the motel that Llewellyn is hiding in at the very end before he gets killed. So now, in the book, it's a little different where they kind of show the sheriff. So the sheriff in the movie obviously opens the door. Shiger's not there. He's already been there and he's already left. He's already got the briefcase. And it follows the theme of the movie that the Tommy Lee Jones sheriff character is always one step behind because this new world is just too quick for him. And that's why it's No Country for Old Men is kind of, a play on the title like that. So then, he puts his gun away and just the scene kind of ends there. But in the book, it's a little different. So Shiger shows up to that hotel. He goes in, he gets the money, he walks out. He gets into the brown Bronco that he has stolen from a guy because he steals multiple cars throughout the whole thing. He's in the brown Bronco. And as he's in it, the Tommy Lee Jones sheriff character pulls up. This is in the book, though. He pulls up to the motel. And Shiger leans his seat back in his car and just lays super low down in his car so you can't see him. But he's also watching the sheriff stand at the door, the little amount that he can look up from his seat. So it's a little different like that. So, Shiger is actually in the parking lot staring at Tommy Lee Jones, and Tommy Lee Jones' character in the book kind of feels like he's being watched, but looks around and sees nobody. And then he eventually enters the room like he does in the movie. And then obviously Shiger leaves at some point in his car once the sheriff's out of his sight. So there's another difference in the movie. Now, while it would probably still be suspenseful that Shiger's sitting in this car and the sheriff pulls up right then, you may think, oh God, there's going to be a super shootout. I still think the Coen brothers did it really well, keeping it very mysterious and not revealing too much and making you think, holy crap, the sheriff is going to die right now because Shiger is right behind that door. So yeah, that's a little difference from the book and the movie, but I feel like to explain that kind of setup in a book would be very hard. So I see why, it was only really possible for the movie. Now, some other differences, I would say, let's think. I don't know if there's too many other differences besides that. Like, it really follows the book pretty closely. There is a little change in the scene when Josh Brolin is running away after he goes back to the scene of the crime to bring water to the one guy, and the one guy is already dead that he was supposed to bring water to. Then obviously the trucks are at the top of the hill. He pretty much, the chase scene's a little different. He gets chased a little bit longer. There's no dog that chases him through the water. And he has to avoid these two drug dealers, running along the river with him the whole time he's floating down it and also walking along it. So he does get chased a little bit longer in the book than in the movie. and the chase is a little more realistic than the movie, I guess you'd say. He still gets hit with like the shotgun BBs in the shoulder, just like in the movie. So yeah, but yeah, both these are supposed to be taking place in West Texas, pretty much, and where they filmed the movie was in Marfa, Texas. And the same time they were filming the movie There Will Be Blood was also being filmed. Which so if you go watch the two movies, there's very similar landscapes, and both movies are really great. So it must have been really hard in 2007 to pick the best picture, but I'm glad it was No Country for Old Men because it is slightly less confusing than There Will Be Blood, and just I don't know, way better. And the Coen brothers know how to make a really good film. But with all that, there really, like I said, there wasn't too many differences. So if you go and read the book first or you go and watch the movie first, you're not going to have too many surprises between the two, which is very rare because a lot of times, book to movie, usually there's so much difference in the movie than the book, and they leave out so much extra stuff that you never, you don't get the full original story, but you do get some of the story. Another difference I'd say, so in No Country for Old Men, Llewellyn Moss shows up to like the El Paso Hotel or something like that. The hotel that he dies in the movie, pretty much, he shows up to. And as he's walking in, there's a girl who's like, "Oh, are you a sport?" And he's like, "Sort of," because he's carrying a gun in his hand. And then she she wants to drink beers with him and all that stuff. So most people in the movie is like, they just think it's like a random girl who happens to be at the motel that he starts flirting with because he's been alone so long, running away, and his wife's not near. And he even shows that he's like, "Oh, I'm married. I can't be fooling around. Like, I know what beer leads to and all that kind of stuff." And, and then in the movie they show the girl who's sitting by the pool, dead, floating in the water, and then him shot in his room. Now, in the book, at one point he gets a car, but he's really injured because he was just had the shootout with Shiger and got shot in like the left side or whatever, and had gone across the border to Mexico, gone through the whole doctor scene and all that. And also when he goes and retrieves the money, like a taxi driver drove him up there. They don't show that in the movie either, which is honestly, I think is fine. It's not a necessary scene. But anyway, so he gets this car, but he's really injured and can't really drive. And as he's driving, there's like a young 18-year-old girl like on the road, like hitchhiking. She says he's 18. So he goes, he picks her up, and he says, "All right, it's like, can you drive for me? Because I'm like, whatever, hurt." And then they kind of have conversation back and forth on like what kind of person he is. Is he a bad guy? Like, is he going to hurt her? All that kind of stuff. And he says he's not going to hurt her. Yeah, and then they go to like a restaurant and have like a meal and stuff, and then eventually ends up at that motel with her. He gets two separate rooms, one for her and one for him, so that, because he's not trying to cheat on his wife. He really does truly love his wife. And yeah, so he truly loves his wife, so he doesn't want to like cheat on her and stuff. He gets like a few beers, like a 3-pack or a 6-pack of beers, and drinks some of them. He eventually goes and sits with the girl and drinks a beer with her, and then in the book, that scene kind of ends there, and then you come back to that scene where both of them have been killed. So it kind of looks like he was cheating on his wife, and that's how the newspaper plays it up in the book. And so, obviously his wife's devastated, thinking that he was cheating on her. And they also find out the 18-year-old girl that he's with is actually a 16-year-old runaway, so she's not even a legal age at all either. So she was lying. But yeah, so that's kind of like, they tie that into the movie a little bit, but they don't really explain like who that girl is. She's just kind of a random girl, and she's kind of almost a big, part of the ending where his wife feels like she's super betrayed by her husband, even though he really wasn't betraying her. But it just looks that way because he's already dead, and the other girl's dead next to him, and they had a hotel room. And they didn't know there was a second one that he had rented for himself that he wasn't standing in front of or whatever. So yeah, they kind of leave that part out of the movie, and they do mention it when they're at the morgue or whatever. The sheriff is like, "Oh yeah, they played it up in the papers all wrong." So you don't really get to know that, but if you read the book, you know what they're talking about, kind of. So another thing, there's one other thing I was going to say that there's a difference of. Crap. Okay, yeah. So when he walks up to that hotel at the very end, the story I just told, and the girl's like, "Hey, are you a sport? You a sporting man?" Like, I think something like that. She says something like that. So in the book, they have like a little flashback where they show how Llewellyn Mosk and his wife had met, and it was pretty much she worked at Walmart. He walked in, and he asked her where the sporting goods section was, and so that's pretty much where that line comes from. She said that to him, and that's when he asked her out the first time he walked into Walmart and talked to her. So that's how their love story went out. So when you go and watch the movie, if you had read the book, you get that reference that girl is making. But if you haven't read the book, it's kind of just like her trying to flirt with him type line. But yeah, so it's pretty cool how the Coen brothers intermingled the book and the movie together. They did cut out a few scenes here and there. Just to kind of, because sometimes you got to get rid of stuff that's not going to play out well on film. It may work well in a book, but it won't play out well on film. And I like how they hinted to things that they had left out of the film, and they were still there for people who had read the book. So obviously I found this out after reading the book. The book did take me about 2 weeks to read. I was on vacation, so I did have time to do it. It could take a little longer. The book is about, and it ends on the same line, and then I woke up when the sheriff is telling it. So that's pretty cool that the movie follows it so closely. But there's about 309 pages to the book. It's a really good read. If you're not a reader, you can definitely go check it out on audiobook. And then also, if you haven't seen the movie, go see it. No Country for Old Men by the Coen brothers, 2007 Academy Award winner, Best Picture. It's an amazing movie and an amazing book. I highly recommend it. If you go look at my other channels, I have a video checking out all the filming locations from the movie. I drove out there to Texas during Christmas to see family, and then on the way back, I checked out a bunch of the filming locations and all that, and it's super cool, so go check out that video. Anyways, guys, that was the review between the book and the movie No Country for Old Men. I probably jumped around a whole bunch on you on explaining the differences and stuff, but that's kind of how it goes. I didn't really have a plan for this at all, but I just wanted to kind of talk it out. But yeah, thank you for listening, guys. This has been Stories with Dan, episode 8, reviewing No Country for Old Men and No Country for Old Men, the book, side-by-side comparison and differences and all that. So thank you for watching. I have plenty of other videos on my YouTube, so please go check those out. Please comment, like, and subscribe. And yeah, have a nice day, guys. See you later.